Let's get it started in here. Hello everyone, and if you're from Russia, then of course, привет. Welcome to Understandable English. Today, I am continuing the travel series, which I've just recently started, where I tell you about various trips that I've taken across the world, and you can learn about the world while also learning about English at the same time. I've already made a few videos about Chechnya, Armenia, and Kamchatka, so if you missed those, you can check those out as well. But if you are familiar with Russian geography, then you probably saw the title of this video and thought, why the heck are you going to Noviy Urengoy in the middle of the cold and the snowy darkness? Well, to answer that, it was a side quest or a side trip. I went to visit my friend who actually I met on my Kamchatka trip, and we were going to take part in a ski marathon in the city or near the city where he lives. This was going to be a northern winter adventure because I hadn't been to this part of Russia or Siberia, so I was interested to see what it was like, especially in the winter. So on the list of places where I was going to be, one of them was Surgut, Khanty Mansiysk, Strezhevoy, and Noviy Urengoy. I, of course, wanted to go further north, but I learned that I needed to have special permission from the government to go that way because of gas mining, or they're collecting the gas, so I couldn't go that far north. So, from the beginning, I flew out to the city of Surgut on an overnight flight, and then I just took a nap in the airport because it was a bit delayed. I got there at, I think, 4 in the morning. Because of time zone shifts, I was very, very tired, so I took a nap while I waited for my friend to come and pick me up. He showed up with his family, and we all got in the car and drove to Khanty Mansiysk, where the marathon was going to be taking place. As always, I enjoy taking road trips across different places because it lets you see a lot more of what's happening around you. As you drive in a car, you can look out the window and see different parts of cities or villages that you pass by, which sometimes it's a lot harder to see if you're on a train or especially if you're in an airplane. One part that I thought was kind of funny was my friend had said that there's a part of the road that all the local people call 5 minutes of America. And that is because the road is quite smooth and new because they built it for people who were getting oil and gas, and so these big trucks can drive on it. But I thought it was kind of funny that people call it 5 minutes of America because, of course, we have nice roads in the United States, but they're not perfect, especially in the north where the winter often freezes and thaws and breaks the roads. When we got to Khanty Mansiysk, we registered for the marathon, got all of our bibs, as we call them, the number and the different things that we need, and we also then checked out what was in the city. I liked these huge statues of mammoths and horses. I even was climbing on one of these horses and I ripped my pants. So I had this huge 3-inch or about 8-centimeter hole in the middle of my pants for the rest of this trip. The next day it was cold and windy, as you would expect in the north in the winter, but we had a marathon to run or to ski. So we did it. It was 50 kilometers of a lot of cold wind and cold air, but it was fun. It was my first ever marathon, and it was interesting because it was a bit flat. Not a lot of hills like I had trained where I was training for this marathon, but it was quite an interesting first experience. The only strange thing was that I technically got disqualified. I don't know why. I think it's because they have these electronic bracelets that you put on your ankle and it measures the time. Maybe there was a problem with my bracelet and for that reason I got disqualified, but I don't really know what happened actually. After the marathon, we headed back to Strezhevoy, which is the city where my friend lives. And this was an interesting trip because typically when you're driving in a car, you cross a border where a time zone is, and it changes by 1 hour. But there was this interesting part when we crossed a river and suddenly the time changes by 2 hours. And I'd never seen that before. Of course, being in an airplane, sometimes it happens where you change many time zones, but in a car, it was very strange to see that. My friend had told me that his grandfather had used this rule back when he was young because he would work until a later time, but the stores would close earlier, so he would just cross the river to the next village, go to the store, buy his things, then cross right back to his home. Strezhevoy was a small town, but I really enjoyed it. It was small and it was walkable, relatively dense, and so you could get to any part that you really needed to by foot. You didn't actually have to drive or take many buses or anything like that. And it had this local feel that people actually care about their community, that that they want their city and their place to be beautiful and wonderful, and people actually try to make these things better. You could say that this city is on the decline, which means that it's getting smaller, it's not growing. And this is because a lot of the youth are moving out to different places because there's not as many opportunities there as there used to, and the youth are seeing that they can go somewhere else and make more money or have more available jobs, and for that reason, the population is declining. But it's still a very cute and homey feeling city. In this part of Siberia, there is not a lot of settlements or villages, so there's a lot of open and untouched nature. And so we went out onto some of the frozen lakes in the middle of the winter, and we went ice fishing. And I'm from the north of the United States, and so I've done ice fishing before, but for some reason I have never ever caught a real fish while ice fishing. But here we caught quite a few, so it was my first time in my life when I actually caught a fish while ice fishing. But after a few days in Strezhevoy, I said goodbye to my friend and I headed to the train station. Again, this is strange, I talked about time zones again. So it was strange that I could wait until the time of my train, or even after the time of my train, and then go to the station, which was on the other side of the river, and suddenly I was on time for my train. But I got in the train and started heading north. And I love train rides, especially in the winter. They're very cozy. You can sit down, watch the snow go by, you can read a book, take a nap. Also, if you're getting tired of sitting down, you can stretch your legs. Maybe when the train stops, you can go outside of the train for 5 minutes and move around a little bit, see what this village that you stopped at looks like, and come back to the train. Sometimes there are even some old grandmas who are selling some sort of pastry or homemade food that you can try and eat. But after the long train ride, we finally arrived, and as you can probably guess, it was snowy, cold, and actually quite sunny. As I walked from the train station to try to find my hostel, I noticed that all of the bus stops were closed and heated. So if you were too cold, you could just go into the bus stop and warm up a little bit, which was an interesting thing to see. Finally, I got to my hostel, and after a bit of confusion, I made my way in. And it was a bit strange because the hostel host had seemed to have a little bit too much to drink, even though it was 10 in the morning. And he could not even manage to write my name down or anything like that on the paper. So I just kind of assumed that he took my data and I gave him my money, but I'm not really sure what happened. I didn't see the host after that for the next 2 nights, so I'm not really sure. But anyway, about the city. I wasn't really sure what to expect because, of course, this city is small and far away from the rest of the country. But it's also full of people who are working for gas and oil. And so for that reason, there tends to be more money in the city. And I would say the city was quite well kept, at least it seemed so, with the snow. It was colorful and painted, and there were a few monuments around. All of the monuments seemed to have something to do with gas. I guess it was a gas capital of Russia, so it makes sense. But of course, like I've often mentioned, is that in every little tiny part of Russia, there's always a World War II memorial. So I found one of those as well. And I also found this interesting, what seemed to be a bread monument or some sort of monument to bread. So if anyone is from this area and they can explain what this is, I'm curious. And so please write in the comments for me. But now I just want to wrap up this episode and say that sometimes traveling doesn't have to be to the most glamorous or flashy areas. Sometimes it's interesting just to go to the places that no one really expects that tourists go to, and you see some new things or meet some new people and make some new friends. Well, that's about it for today. If you know anyone in these areas, you should share this video with them so they can learn a little bit of English and also see what a foreigner thinks about their area and their city. If you learned something new, feel free to press like or subscribe. I make all kinds of English content like these travel vlogs and also more serious things about music or grammar. As always, have a wonderful day. Toodles.